My dear Sagittarius, some work lights you up from the inside, and some work quietly builds walls around a mind that was never meant to be contained. The environments that flatten you tend to share a very specific architecture. Small rooms, repetitive tasks, policies that exist because they have always existed, horizons that never change. You can tolerate those conditions for a while, the way anyone can hold their breath for a while. But you were not built for holding your breath. You were built for the kind of work that keeps expanding, keeps asking new questions, keeps sending you somewhere you have not been before. Recognizing that about yourself is not an excuse to avoid commitment. It is the most honest piece of career intelligence you possess. Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign ruled by Jupiter. In plain professional terms, that combination produces something genuinely distinctive. Jupiter governs expansion, wisdom, higher learning, philosophy, and the drive to understand the world at its broadest scale. Mutable signs adapt, synthesize, and move fluidly between ideas and environments without losing their footing. Fire as an element is generative, enthusiastic, and oriented toward possibility rather than limitation. Together, those qualities produce someone who thinks in large frameworks, communicates with natural conviction, and brings a kind of expansive optimism to their work that is not naivety. It is a functional professional asset. The careers that deserve you are the ones that actually need someone who can see further than the current situation and bring other people along toward what they see. The first field worth considering seriously is higher education, philosophy, and the world of ideas at its most expansive. This covers university teaching and research, academic leadership, philosophy and ethics in applied contexts, and the broader intellectual professions where the primary task is developing, testing, and transmitting frameworks for understanding the world. For Sagittarius, this is not just a compatible professional environment. It is one of the few environments that is actually built around the questions you have been asking your entire life and treats those questions as productive rather than disruptive. Jupiter rules higher learning in the most foundational sense. Not the acquisition of information, the pursuit of wisdom. The difference is significant. Information answers the question of what. Wisdom answers the question of why, and beyond that, what it means. Sagittarius tends to operate naturally at the second level. You are less interested in collecting facts than in understanding the pattern the facts are pointing toward. Academic and philosophical environments are structured around exactly that kind of inquiry. Mutable fire in a teaching context means you bring enthusiasm to ideas that is genuinely contagious. You do not recite material. You make a case for why the material matters, and that distinction changes everything about how an audience receives it. Here is the scene. You are teaching or presenting on a subject that most people in the room have already decided is abstract and therefore not relevant to their actual lives. You can feel the polite distance in the room, the folded arms. The laptop's open to something else, and you do something that no curriculum guide prescribes. You stop. You tell a story about how this idea showed up in a real situation with real consequences for real people. Not a case study from a textbook, something that actually happened, that you actually know about, that connects the abstraction to something the people in that room have felt. The laptop's close. The arms unfold. And for the next 20 minutes, the room is genuinely alive with something that was not there before. That is Sagittarius teaching. It does not just inform, it converts. Long term, what Sagittarius tends to build in academic and intellectual fields is a body of thought that crosses traditional disciplinary lines. Where specialists go deep in one lane, you develop the ability to draw connections between lanes that specialists cannot see from inside their own. Over years, that cross-disciplinary perspective becomes its own form of expertise. You become the thinker or the teacher that other thinkers and teachers bring in when the problem is too large or too complex for any single framework to contain. That kind of broad intellectual authority is rare and takes decades to develop properly. Sagittarius is one of the few signs with both the appetite and the staying power to develop it. Here is where to start. If higher education or applied philosophy draws you and you are not yet formally in that world, identify one intellectual question that genuinely obsesses you and spend 6 months going as deep into it as you can. Read everything foundational. Find the scholars who disagree with each other and understand why. Then write down your own position in plain language. That document, however rough, is the beginning of a scholarly voice. Without a voice, academic careers remain aspirational. With one, they become possible. The second career path that tends to suit Sagittarius at a deep level is international work, cross-cultural professions, and the fields that operate across borders, languages, and worldviews. This covers international relations and diplomacy, global nonprofit work, cross-cultural consulting, international law, foreign correspondence, humanitarian organization leadership, and any professional role where the ability to function effectively across different cultural frameworks is the core competency. What makes this a natural fit for Sagittarius is not just a love of travel, though that is often present. It is the genuine intellectual curiosity about how different human societies have organized themselves, what they value, and what can be learned from the comparison. Jupiter has a long and well-established association with foreign cultures, long-distance travel, and the expansion of perspective that comes from genuine encounter with the unfamiliar. In a professional context, that Jupiterian quality gives Sagittarius a natural comfort with difference. You do not find cultural unfamiliarity threatening. You find it interesting. That orientation, the movement toward the unfamiliar rather than away from it, is the foundational disposition that every effective cross-cultural professional needs. It cannot be trained into someone who does not have it. You tend to have it in abundance. Mutable fire means you adapt quickly to new environments without losing your own orientation. You can be fully present in a context that is very different from the one you came from, genuinely engaged with its logic on its own terms, while still maintaining the perspective that allows you to translate between that context and others. That combination of genuine engagement and retained perspective is exactly what cross-cultural work demands. Too much adaptation and you lose your usefulness as a bridge. Too little and you never build the trust the work requires. Sagittarius tends to find that balance instinctively. Picture this. You are in a professional context that involves parties from significantly different cultural backgrounds. A negotiation, a partnership meeting, a program design session. Things have stalled. Not because of bad faith on either side, because each side is reading the other's behavior through a framework the other side does not share. Most people in the room either do not notice the misalignment or do not know how to name it without causing offense. You notice it, and you find a way to name it that gives both sides a new frame for understanding what has been happening. Not by taking sides, by expanding the context. The stall breaks. The conversation moves. And later, privately, people from both sides tell you that your observation was the thing that saved the day. You accept the thanks graciously and do not explain that you were simply paying attention to what was actually in the room. Over a long career in international and cross-cultural work, what Sagittarius develops is a kind of portable professional credibility. Because your effectiveness is rooted in genuine curiosity and adaptability rather than in institutional affiliation or regional expertise, it travels. You become someone who can be dropped into a new context, in a new country, with a new set of stakeholders, and be genuinely useful within a time frame that surprises the people who brought you in. That portability is one of the most valuable career assets in a globally connected professional world, and it compounds with every new context you navigate successfully. This is the move to make. If international or cross-cultural work is where you want to build, begin by developing genuine depth in one specific cultural or regional context that is not your own. Not a survey depth. Learn the history, the political context, the values, the professional norms of one particular place or community with real seriousness. That depth in one context becomes the model for how you develop depth in the next one. And the next. Breadth built on a foundation of genuine depth is a very different professional asset from breadth alone. The third path worth naming for Sagittarius is the law, specifically the areas of law that deal with large questions of principle, constitutional law, human rights law, international law, and the advocacy and public interest legal work that engages with the systems that govern how societies are organized and how justice is defined and administered. This may be the most surprising of the three paths for some Sagittarians, because law has a reputation for procedural precision that seems to conflict with your broader, more philosophical orientation. But Sagittarius is not drawn to law for the procedure. Sagittarius is drawn to law for the argument, for the question of what is right, for the chance to stand in front of a system of authority and make the most compelling case for a principle that matters. Jupiter rules law and justice in the philosophical sense, not the mechanics of legal procedure, but the underlying question of what a just society looks like and how its institutions should behave. Sagittarius, in a legal context, tends to gravitate toward the cases and the causes that carry genuine moral weight. You are less interested in contract disputes than in constitutional questions. Less interested in the fine print than in the principle the fine print is supposed to serve. That orientation can make you impatient with the procedural dimensions of legal practice, and that impatience is worth managing honestly. The signs who do best in principled legal careers are the ones who develop enough procedural discipline to give their philosophical instincts a vehicle that actually works in court. Mutable fire in a legal advocacy context produces a natural persuader. You construct arguments the way you tell stories, with momentum, with conviction, and with an eye on the larger point the argument is building toward. You do not get lost in the weeds of an argument. You keep the horizon visible for yourself and for whoever is listening. In appellate work, in rights-based advocacy, in the legal dimensions of policy development, that quality of principled, expansive argumentation is precisely what the work requires. Here is the scene. You are making an argument, formally or informally, for a position that the people on the other side genuinely believe is wrong. Not factually wrong, wrong in principle. The disagreement is not about data. It is about values, about what matters, about what kind of world we are trying to build. Most advocates in that situation either get angry or get technical. You do neither. You find the value underneath the value. The thing both sides actually agree on, at a level deeper than the disagreement, and you build your argument from that shared foundation upward toward your conclusion. It is not a trick. It is a genuine act of intellectual generosity, and it tends to work in ways that anger and technicality do not. Long-term, what Sagittarius builds in principled legal careers is a reputation as someone who takes the hard cases. Not the unwinnable ones necessarily, though sometimes those too. The cases that matter beyond their immediate outcome. The ones where winning or losing shapes something larger than the parties involved. That willingness to plant your professional flag in the territory of what genuinely matters is one of the most defining career choices a Sagittarius lawyer or advocate can make. It costs you some of the easier work. It gives you a professional life with a through line that means something. Here is how to move toward this path. If law and principled advocacy draw you, find the area of law where you feel the most personal conviction and read the landmark cases and arguments in that area carefully. Not just the outcomes, the reasoning. Read the dissenting opinions as carefully as the majority ones. Understanding how the strongest minds in a legal tradition disagree is the most direct preparation for learning to argue within it. Then find a way to do even one piece of volunteer advocacy work in that area, whether through a legal aid organization, a rights-based nonprofit, or a policy research body. The goal is contact with real legal reasoning before you commit to the credential, not after. Before you close this out, take a genuine moment with what you just heard. Of those three fields, higher education and the intellectual professions, international and cross-cultural work, and principled legal advocacy, which one felt immediately familiar? Which one described something you have already been doing in your own life, in your own way, without quite naming it as a career direction? And which one arrived from an angle you did not expect and left you sitting with a question you were not planning to sit with today? All three of those reactions are worth something. Do not dismiss any of them. Leave a comment telling me which path resonated most honestly. Or tell me which field you are already working in and whether this description matched the reality of what that work actually demands from you. Those first-hand reflections from people in the field are some of the most valuable things this community produces. If this kind of grounded, sign-specific vocational reflection is genuinely useful to you, subscribing means more of it continues to find its way to you. My dear Sagittarius, this is a return to video. Please make sure to save it and revisit whenever you need it. Also, obviously don't forget to like and subscribe. And have a blessed day.